I want to introduce you to Tim Liu, who's the Executive Director of Strategy for an agency called Foolproof, and Adrian Copland, who's the Accelerate Partner for Copland. They are going to be talking about speed, which is something we've not really come across, so I'm really excited to see your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Great. Well, thanks for coming to our session. It's called Turning Ideas into Businesses at Speed, how we launched an autonomous insurance product in 3 months. Okay, does this work? Great. So I'll start. So my name's Tim Liu. I work at a company called Foolproof. We're a design company based in the UK and in Singapore, and we're an experience design specialist. I think our specialty is really helping large companies conceive of and deliver digitally powered products and services.
Okay. Hi, my name is Adrian Copland. I work for a company called AXA XL, who 4 weeks ago were XL Copland. So if I say the wrong company name, that's my fault. We're a specialty insurer. We're now the largest property and casualty insurer in the world, and I'm certainly not used to ever doing a presentation with a bunch of people not in suits. So this is the first time you'll ever see a London insurance person not in a suit. And we worked with Foolproof as we went through this autonomy product. So we'll just talk a little bit about where this presentation came from. So we asked Foolproof to help us think about how we would go to market with a global insurance product for autonomy. When we thought about that, we generally didn't really think we could do it in the timeframes that we set ourselves. So, but with the help of a workshop that we're going to go through today, we managed to launch a product from the start of that workshop within 10 or 11 weeks. And as far as we know, it's the only global insurance product who specifically serves autonomy as a product. And that's opened up two things for us. First of all, insurance in the world that I live in is still a broker-led organization. So 70 to 80% of all of our customers are brokers. So Aon, Willis, Marsh, they bring us most of our business. And they've responded really well to us going to market so quickly. They've never seen it before. They've never had the experience of somebody going out with a brand new product so quickly. But secondly, it's also opened up a set of customers that we've just never had before. So those tech companies out in Silicon Valley that probably are producing autonomous products or mobility solutions who have never really thought about insurance. They've just said, I tell you what, I've got this really good tech stack. I now want to go live with it. And then they realize they need insurance to put the thing on the road. So it's opened up a completely new set of customers as well as impressing our current set of customers.
So before we go into actually what we did, it's probably worth breaking down this idea of autonomous vehicles and insurance. And so what do we mean by autonomous vehicle? Well, when Adrian and I first started talking about this, I got very excited because I know nothing. At the time, I knew nothing about autonomous vehicles, but I watch a lot of movies. And so I thought, great, so we're doing sort of Minority Report, Total Recall type stuff. But then Adrian said, look, calm down. It's not science fiction in the way that you talk about it. Actually, there's a way of thinking about it that's really important to understand.
So just to give a bit of context, I'll spend a minute or so on this slide. So what we put up here is essentially how the globe thinks about autonomy in vehicles. So it's not the most exciting slide in the world, but it's pretty ubiquitous in the way that anybody would talk about autonomy. So if I start at level 0, that's an old vehicle that would have no autonomy built in, so a standard vehicle. Most vehicles today would be at level 1. So a new vehicle you buy today would have some kind of cruise control, some kind of automatic braking, lane assist, automatic parking, those types of technologies. The Tesla autopilot that gets all the rave reviews and lots of videos on YouTube of people playing board games and sitting in the passenger seat is a level 2, level 3 type scenario. And this makes insurers and regulators very nervous. So any autonomous system that relies on a human having to interact at a split second makes us very, very nervous. Because as you see from those YouTube videos, it's not easy to just react if you've been switched off and you're reading a book. So we see autonomy as purely level 4 and level 5. And when we talk about level 4, we talk about basically a vehicle being able to do all autonomous functions, all functions of that vehicle within a geofence location. So within a particular location, it can do everything it needs to do, including emergency brake, emergency stop if it sees anything. And a level 5 car is essentially remove the steering wheel. So you could turn around, forget it, you don't need to be involved. So that's how we talk about autonomy. That's how the globe thinks about autonomy. And as I said, we were concentrating purely on level 4, level 5, rather than anything that Tesla or Mercedes or Audi are doing today, which is a level 2, level 3 type car.
And when we think about this practically on the road today, so as Adrian's described, today we're here. But the issue that we've got is we can't predict with any real certainty how quickly this is going to happen. So we're sort of thinking, is it 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? I think even a couple of days ago on the BBC website, someone was saying, you've just bought the last car that you'll ever buy because actually in the future it'll be all subscription model and you'll get it direct from the manufacturer type thing. So that creates a bit of a problem if you're trying to mobilise not just a team, but an organisation to say, this is why we need to take the step, and this is who we're going to serve, this is our customer, and this is the product. Because we don't, unless we can agree where and when we're going to be operating in, we don't know what the product is.
But as a specialty insurer, some of our main clients, it's not you and I. Well, it could be you guys if you own multi-million-pound yachts and artwork, because we do that as well, or racehorses. But most of our clients own facilities of some sort. So our clients will be warehousing, airports, ports, mines, and we are seeing clients come to us today testing and trialing those autonomy products. Now, when I talk about that, often people say, yeah, but there's Amazon have got autonomy, Ocado have got autonomy in their warehouses today, ports have. They all have, but it's very expensive infrastructure. Generally, that infrastructure is probably magnets built into the floor of wherever you are, and that costs millions and millions of dollars or pounds to put in. What we're seeing with autonomy is essentially hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of investment suddenly gets you an autonomous system. So it's really opening the world up to a completely new customer set. And if you think about all the vehicles that are running around an airport today, 90% of vehicles that are airside today are stationary at any one point. So they're only utilizing 10% of those vehicles. And secondly, the biggest cost of running an airport really is security. They don't want people airside because of security reasons. So if we can start to think about autonomizing, which is a great word I struggle to say, the vehicles that side in airports, then we really are beginning to change the economic dynamic of those types of environments. And we're seeing clients do that today, not in 2 years, 3 years. We expect to see airside autonomy in the next 6 to 12 months.
And I think practically, the organisation had learnings about actually autonomy in practice. So when we think about the other side of that statement, insurance, what do we mean? And I think this is really the question that I'd sort of put to Adrian when we first started talking is, what do you mean by a product? Do you mean a product as you would understand it today, like an insurance cover that you have a contract and you pay a premium, and then if something goes wrong, you can make a claim against, and then you have to renew this thing? Or actually, if we think that autonomy is going to change this landscape so much, then actually we should probably be a little bit more broader in our thinking. The customer will be different, the service might be different, and the revenue model might be different, and even the operating and service model could be all very, very, very different. So can we get further down this end? And I think this was probably part of the challenge of actually bringing the team into that sort of space.
I mean, insurance essentially has been transacted in the same way since the 1600s, and is very price sensitive. Most of you guys buy your insurance based on price. How many of you really look at the coverages? How many really get excited about whether it's got legal cover or not in your car insurance? It's very price sensitive. So we think autonomy gives us the opportunity to really change some of those dynamics. And as part of that thinking, we developed a relationship with a company called Oxbotica, who are an Oxford-based organization who spun out of Oxford University. They essentially create autonomous software solutions. So they're basically the Windows system for autonomy. And they're becoming world-renowned for providing this type of software to manufacturers and vehicle manufacturers. They're really big plus for the UK economy at the moment, and they get a lot of press as long as them as Five Iron. We've had a 3-year relationship with them. And then as part of that relationship, we got involved in a consortium called Driven. Driven is essentially tasked with putting a level 4 autonomous car on the road between Oxford and London in September 2019. So for all those people that say autonomy will never work because you're only testing it in Phoenix, Arizona and California where it's straight roads and bright sunshine, these guys are in and around Oxford today. So those who live in Summertown, Oxford, you'll see Oxbotter going around. They're in London in October. So they're already testing in these urban environments. And essentially, when I took the job, I'm not much of an academic, even at all. In fact, I'm not an academic at all. And when I took the role, having come from quite an operational role, one of the key things for me was we weren't just going to talk about it. We weren't just going to write thought leadership like many of the insurers out there today and many other big consultancies. I actually wanted to go out there with a commercial proposition that our customers wanted and our customers demanded. And that's why it was important for me to actually go out there, not just be about trials and pilots, but actually go out there with a commercial proposition.
But to do that, we have to get over this conundrum of actually what are we talking about here? When are we entering the market? Who's our customer and what are we actually offering? And so to get the team aligned around that, the thing that we did was design a product vision and roadmap. And the thing that we thought we'd share with you today is the process that we went through. Basically, who we got into the room, what we did, and why we think we were able to get not just this team, but the organisation behind it to act quickly. So there were kind of key steps. The first thing is in a classic warm-up, we need to get everyone together and actually starting to act like a team. We need to have a shared understanding about how the world works today in this space. So when people own cars or organisations own fleets of vehicles, how does that all work? And then actually we have to have some shared view of actually where this is all going and actually how it's all going to unfold. Because only at that point can we say, so who's the customer and what are we going to do for them? And most importantly, what's our role in all this? What's our purpose as an organisation and actually what role do we want to play? Do we want to be a leader in this role or do we want to be a follower? This is really where we sort of start to get an organisation behind something. And then practically, how are we going to do it? So what's our roadmap? The thing that we want to show you is really this process was very, very quick. There's actually probably about 2 weeks worth of work, but really based around a 2-day workshop. Who's been in a 2-day workshop where you've had to come up with a campaign or a product? Okay, so quite a few of you. How many of those produce nothing? Okay, well, it's cool. So something produced. How many of them actually gone on to launch products quickly? Okay, so a handful of these. My experience with this sort of stuff is sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And because this worked, we actually went back and tried to understand why this was so successful. So that's what we want to really share with you today. So remember that time scale? Well, we talked about how we're going to get people around this 20 to 30 year time scale in the future. The way that we found most effective, the mechanic that we used to get people on the same page was to think about a 30-year timescale but going backwards. And so what we discovered is if most of this team was kind of nicely middle class, I think. Most people had a living room that looked like this, so family, maybe around a screen, but they were looking at different screens. People are looking at phones, tablets. Actually, the reality is probably people upstairs looking at, watching Amazon Prime or Netflix on a tablet. We can recognise that today, but it's not very long ago that we recognised this picture, and it doesn't, in some ways it's superficially very similar, but it's very different in that there's a piece of furniture here that houses 6 boxes, and there's just a massive cables underneath there, and there's probably a Sky box, a VCR, DVD player, Sony PlayStation, maybe even a hi-fi system that you've hooked up to get surround sound. It's an absolute mess behind there. And then if you're as old as I am, I'm older than Adrian, I'm 46, I remember, not the war, I don't remember the war so much, but I remember sitting around the TV in the 1970s with my family, and we only had 2 TVs, two TV stations. So in our lifetime, we can remember a very disrupted ecosystem. And this is the thing. When I said, who has a streaming service in their house, everyone said, we've got one. And the most popular one was Netflix. So we said, well, great. When we think about Netflix, in 2007, this is in the US, they launched streaming, the service that we all love and are kind of addicted to. And that was really enabled by broadband. So the mainstream adoption of broadband. the thing that a lot of us don't remember, or maybe because if you live in the US, you might remember this, is that in 1998, to this present day, actually what they launched back in 1998 was an unlimited DVD rental service, which was really a response to Blockbuster. I think Reed Hastings talks about he found a DVD that he hadn't returned and it was hundreds of dollars worth of late fees. There's got to be a better way of doing this. Now, this is a company that's pivoted pretty heavily in terms of what they do. But actually, when they launched in 1998, they built some capabilities and assets that were really, really valuable at the time that they wanted to go into streaming. And those things included a brand, a consumer brand that people liked and recognised, a subscription customer base, they built a data and recommendations engine, and they established a business model and operational model that actually had some reuse in the future. And so when we think about that, it becomes a lot more clear, I think, because we're allowed to say, if we want to be a leader in this seemingly distant future, what could we do today? What could we build today that would give us the capabilities and the head start against our competition? And what, importantly, could we learn if we got involved now? And that's a gift to you guys, because actually that's just a really simple exercise to show, even if the future is very unpredictable, there are things that we might want to do today to make us ready for the future. Yep. Adrian, I don't know whether you've got anything to add around that.
Well, I just think that really helped. I mean, sitting there with a bunch of 14 insurance types, we could have played Spot the Actuary, by the way, with the original photo, because he was the only one in the suit. It was just a really interesting concept for us in the sense of we had a lot of people who were going, where are you going with this? I've wasted 2 days of my time and you're telling me about Netflix. We don't even insure Netflix. Why are you telling me about Netflix? So there was a leap of faith by everybody in that room, but we all realized that actually the big problem in the room was nobody really understood where the commercial proposition was coming from, because we could all guess when autonomy is coming, but we actually don't know the answer. So it was a real good way, or it was a great way of us getting to understand what's important today to help us build that capability for the future.
And don't underestimate how much time you need to do for these things. I mean, essentially the entire process that we went through in terms of looking at the current market, imagining the future market and the underlying trends that sort of pushed us into that direction, how these future business models work, and actually what are the sort of business models that we might need to grow from. We did it on Netflix. We spent about half a day on it out of a 2-day session. Yep. But the point of it is actually most of these people had never been involved in a product vision or a roadmap before. And so my tip would be, do a practice paper before you sit the exam. Actually getting used to this stuff. We often do these warm-up exercises, a little throwaways at the beginning of sessions, but actually we spent enough time in it to actually be confident and comfortable in the tool set that we were trying to apply to a very, very hard problem. So that's a free tip. The process that we went through is a pretty recognizable process if you've done this before. So I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time, but things like ecosystem mapping, so not just process mapping for actually how does someone buy an insurance product or how they buy a car and what are the responsibilities of owning a vehicle. We thought about ecosystems and the different players and where value gets exchanged between the players in those ecosystems. Then what we did was we actually allowed us to think more broadly about context and trends. So actually, rather than just autonomy and autonomous technology as something that moves us forward, what are the other things that are going to affect us? So things like regulation. Actually, if they're going to ban diesel vehicles, actually, is that a factor in the way that we think about all of this? Where are consumers going? The idea of the end of ownership, and actually that you subscribe to everything in your life, is an important factor in the way that we think about this.
I think I'd kind of build on that. There's a concept for us that says what happens when personal lines motor disappears. So when Aviva, when Direct Line, when Travelers, if you live in the States, when they stop writing personal lines because the model changes, the risk has to come to us. So we have to start thinking about that ecosystem and what that means to us, because we just don't have an experience, particularly experience in that ecosystem today. So this process really helped us think about the broader picture of that insurance process.
Cool. More post-it notes. So that basically, it was through that process that we forced the team to map out an adoption timeline. So this isn't necessarily an accurate prediction of actually how things are going to pan out, but it was more of a model to think about how different players in the market are going to need to adopt this technology and what their needs at the time of adoption are going to be. Yeah. So we had a way of thinking about, well, maybe this, as we showed that picture before, there's closed environments where this is a current thing. This is actually happening today. And there are customers in this space that are probably underserviced. And actually, how does this play out? Because when you can do that, then you can start thinking about actual people. You can think about customers. And actually, what are their specific needs and concerns, and through the adoption and the implementation of this technology. And then this is where, really, I mean, this is the reason why I think Adrian sort of hired Foolproof to get into this, because actually, really, then you've got to think about people. And actually, so what are these people really thinking about in terms of their job role, their needs, but actually their fears about actually being involved in new things, and actually how can we support not just the insurance part of this, but actually more broadly in terms of actually how to get a company to change around this new technology. Because really, then that really very seamlessly allowed us to move into thinking about products and services. What are the sorts of things that AXA XL could actually do for these customers? And it's worth saying, if you remember that first slide, a couple of these things would be what we would refer to as products these days, but actually the majority were more service-related offerings.
And I think as we mature the insurance contract, at the moment, as I said, it's very transactional, it's very cost-driven, but actually, for all of most people's distaste of insurance companies, they have a set of skills and a set of knowledge and a set of understanding of risk that very few other organizations have. You know, we will be able to tell you to the nearest million the hurricane that's going through Florida and South Carolina now, where the damage is, who's underinsured. There's a lot of knowledge built up in insurance companies that's just not used or not bought for. So how do we take that knowledge into a world of autonomy that's a completely new product to start to feed services back? So how do we advise on cyber? We insure cyber, so we must have a view on it. So how do we start to think about offering some kind of cyber services? And this process really opened our mind, opened our thought process of what could we offer as well as just a transactional insurance product. And what was quite interesting about who the customer is, actually who the customer is was a real problem for us. Because actually if 70-80% of your business is coming through a broker, we may not ever know who the end customer is. So even if you are somebody that owns a lot of expensive art, you are going to employ a broker, and then you're going to come to us. So who is our customer was a real problem. So getting through this process enabled us to answer some fundamental questions that we struggle with even today on the same policies that we write today.
And so all of this culminates when we do this activity into, I think, I went to, is it Ruth and Richard's presentation from eConsultancy yesterday about transformation through people in the digital transformation room. Did anyone go to that? It's really good. One of the exercises they talked about in there is Amazon's writing the press release activity. Has anyone done that before? So basically the theory behind it is if you want to get everyone on the same page about where you are going, start from the end. And so one of the first things that Amazon does when they are looking to launch a new product or service is they do three things. They write the press release. So this is what we want to tell the market about a new product. And so you have to tell everything that you would have to tell the market about how that product works. The second thing they write is the customer FAQs. So actually, how would you need to deal with the questions that customers would have about you doing something new? And then they do visualizations. They tend to do storyboards about how this thing would work. We use that technique a lot, but one thing we did here, which is slightly different, is that we actually got the team to write press releases at different times. So if you remember that first timeline, we talked about 3 to 5 years zone. What product or service do we think we could launch? 5 to 10 years time. Can we imagine what sort of product or service that we would be taking to market? I think it's significant that actually when we were thinking about this space here, we were probably thinking about 2019, I think. But really it was the team in the room that said, I think we could do something quicker than that. I think we could launch something. Based on everything that we know here and our desire to do it, I think we could do something quicker. And so we set ourselves the challenge of writing the 3-month press release for actually what could we get into the market. And so we can't share you the full strategy, but we had a way of talking about a roadmap for adoption.
So, so as we've discussed, for us it was about making it real to our customer group and our people internally. So how do you explain something that nobody really knows, the adoption curve and the timeline behind it? And most of you will have some. What I do know is that when you work in the world of autonomy, everybody's got an opinion on it, including my mother, who's a Daily Mail reader, who just says it's never going to happen. But everybody's got an opinion. So we came up with a way of being able to describe a shared vision in a shared language in the way that we talk about autonomy. This was actually the words that were written up from those kind of handwritten slides of the actual press release that was put together in that workshop.
That's right. This is literally a straight transcript of that flip chart write-up. That press release that you saw at the beginning of the presentation is probably about 80% a straight lift from that. So 3 months later?
That's our CEO at the time, a guy called Mike McGavick, who was a big believer in insurance enabling technology, launching the product to the world which was using almost word for word the press release that was built as part of this workshop. And I think, as Tim's kind of alluded to, the real power to this was enabling everybody to have a clear vision and getting a shared sense of what insurance could be rather than what it is today. So having a purpose to what we could do going forward.
I think there's a real obsession about speed in organisations. So when you talk to any one of our clients at Foolproof, they're all talking about agile at the moment, or maybe product management or lean product management. And when you really sort of dig underneath that, there's an obsession about speed. Why are we so slow at delivering things? And my worry with all of this is actually most people are focusing on speed without focusing on direction. Where are we going? Well, if we're making fantastic time but we don't know where we're going, that's a problem. And I think it's an increasing problem with a lot of organisations. So the thing that unlocked speed for us was really this sense of purpose and direction. But there were also 4 things that I would really take away when we sort of sat down to think about this. So the first one is having a complete team that can launch a product. I mean, I've been to plenty of workshops, and maybe you have too, where you're there to conceive of a product or a campaign or some sort of communication, but actually everyone that you need to launch that thing is not there. And I think you're allowed to say, we shouldn't do this. Because the time it's going to take to bring those people back into the loop and the level of disruption they will cause if they don't agree with this is significant. If weeks or months matter to us, don't allow yourself to do that.
And I was determined, this is the first workshop I've ever been involved in, where you essentially, in that photo, have got the end-to-end of an insurance value chain, all the way from pricing, underwriting, claims, reinsurance. It's end-to-end. So all the people that needed to be there to launch that product were in that room.
The second thing is, these sound really obvious. The second one is an active, engaged sponsor. And so this is Nancy, who you saw in that photo. She's the global sponsor. She pays for all of this. Bring her on the journey. She was in this workshop for 2 days. I mean, I've been in quite a lot of workshops where the sponsor turns up on the first morning and says, I'm so glad that you've taken 2 days out of your time to come and work on this. There's nothing more important to me than what you are doing. And then they will leave after 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And if you're lucky, they may even come back at the end of the sessions for a playback. Tell me what you did. They have no idea of the thought process or the journey that the team goes on. This sponsor did. This sponsor pitched back to the team what we should do.
All right, our group tackled what we wanted to bring to the market within the next 3 months. So here's our press release. XL Catlin innovates autonomy. On April 18th, XL Catlin launched the Comprehensive Autonomy Cover. Any commercial process that utilizes autonomy across all industry segments and geographics We're looking for trailblazers and early adopters to realize the benefits of autonomy, to change the world and make it safer and a greener place.
It's pretty rare to have that session finish with the sponsor actually being able to explain why we are doing stuff. And I would say you should insist on that. This is just a really smart minor thing. Take the time to get aligned. I remember I described in a 2-day session, often you do this little warm-up exercise and it's supposed to be a little fun, everyone gets to know each other's name. And then you jump into the problem. We've only got 2 days. 2 days is bugger all time. We need to actually get stuck into this very, very difficult problem. This is how the timing worked on this. We spent from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. on the first day doing that. By the end of the first day, we'd mainly been talking about today, no autonomy. Sorry, we started talking about it a little bit. People were quite nervous, I think.
Very nervous at this point.
And I'm saying trust us. Trust us with what we're doing. When we started to map out, hey, this is where we think the world is going, this next morning, it only really left us with 4 hours out of the 2 days, 2 p.m. to 6 p.m., to map out what are we actually going to do. But it was probably the easiest thing to do once we'd gotten everyone aligned.
I totally agree. I was very nervous after day one, I have to say. I had some people talking to me saying, this is a waste of time, where are we going to get there, how are we ever going to get there? But fair to everybody in the room, they did trust the process. Yeah. And nobody even drank until 6 p.m., which is very unlike the insurance industry. So it was refreshing, and we did get there in time.
Maybe we should have been drinking earlier.
Yeah,
that would have made it quicker. But the last point is probably the one that I want to leave you with. I think Adrian and I, this is the one that we probably feel the most passionately about, is this idea of connecting, or maybe even if you're a big company that's been around for a long time, reconnecting to a deeper purpose. And this idea that why we are doing things is more important than what we are doing. Don't know if you remember, it was written up here, we believe we should do this because we'll make the world a safer place. Yeah.
And I think often you hear CEOs, especially of organizations of 180,000 or 7,000 as we were when we did this, they often have a vision and a purpose. But that vision and purpose gets lost as you come through the layers when you've got cost controls, you've got to save money, you've got to outsource this. And I think we lose that connection to what the industry or the organization is that you work for. And this was a wonderful experience of us reconnecting what insurance could be. I know it doesn't sound too exciting for you guys, but in some sense, without insurance, none of this technology will come to life. So without insurance, you couldn't bring autonomy to work because nobody could put them on the roads. So we have a role to play in enabling this technology. And also, by enabling that technology, we fundamentally believe it's going to be good for the environment and it's going to be safer.
So this idea that action happens, speed is enabled when our belief is greater than our fear, yeah, is a really important idea, I think, in all of this.
And we built that belief that we could do this, that the enablement of autonomy is going to make the world safer, as I said. And I have to say, I've been supported throughout by Foolproof and through my organization. And there is a connection back to that, why we're here, why we came to work in the first place, why an insurance company was set up in the first place. And it's been quite refreshing for me personally, having been in the industry for 10 years, to really kind of reconnect with why I work in the industry I do.
Thanks very much.
That was superb. Absolutely brilliant. Right, we've got a few more minutes to take questions, and the first one is, I'm in a very risk-averse market too. How do you open non-marketing minds to the idea of change? And to add to that, I think what's really commendable about this project is the fact that you come from a very risk-averse industry, and you've kind of made it happen. So, I think it's a great inspiration as a viewer.
So the irony of insurance is we don't like risk, even though we write risk, and we are ultimately a risk-averse organization. And as I said, we always laugh about the actuaries. The actuaries get a really hard time because they spend their lives telling us what we can't do rather than what we can do. But without them, we wouldn't function. I think for us, for me, it was a topic that was interesting. B, it got us out of the grind of always talking about cost. So there was something in the topic that got people excited, and secondly, it's about forcing a bit of buy-in. So this concept of emotional intelligence, stick and carrot. How do you understand the people in the room to pull them with you? And if you get, I would say that sponsorship is key. Without the right sponsorship that really believe in it, it is very difficult. And across our organization, we have some very, very good sponsors that sponsor this stuff and some not so good sponsors. And I think I'd finish with insurance is in a reflective moment that it needs to change. It needs to do something else. The business model is slightly broken. We can't keep offering cheaper and cheaper insurance products. And there is an understanding in the industry that we've got to do something different. So that helped us as well.
And there's a question here about regulation, because it's a very regulated industry. How did you cope with that kind of layer of, again, thinking?
So the regulation about launching an insurance product is very complex. You have to be admitted and non-admitted, for those that know, well, from an insurance perspective in the US. Essentially what we did was we used, we pulled together insurance products that already existed, so it enabled us not to have to go through the regulation process. And the regulation around autonomy, we're all taking a guess on it. So in some sense that enabled us to shortcut some of that thinking.
And what really came across when you were talking about that is that after day one, there was fear. This isn't going to work. And yet you both single-handedly got through that kind of moment of uncertainty. And how did you, as a kind of outside consultant, because I've been in that situation, how did you keep on that journey? Because it was very clear, but you masterfully got through that hurdle. Do you want to share anything?
I think there's a different challenge if you're trying to improve an existing product or service to inventing something completely new. And our sense is there are some techniques that we're a customer-centered design company. All of our work and our thinking is really centered around what a customer's doing today and what will they do if we could make things better for them. But in some cases, you're inventing things that the customer either doesn't, they currently don't exist, or they can't even express their needs. And the only way of actually knowing is to make the product. And so in some ways, this is an example of where we just had to get a product into the market to understand who would find the appeal and where the value was going to be. And I think the real learnings come after we launched it.
And when we went to market, we're not sure the response. You're not sure about who's going to buy this product. And in a sense, as Tim said, the learnings come when you start speaking to the clients, to start speaking to these organizations that are clearly looking for a demand that we have predicted, which helped us and gave us a bit of kudos. But in a sense, providing what the customer wants was the ultimate satisfaction for me personally, since the product didn't exist. So we were working through that.
Unfortunately, we've run out of time. I'd love to hear more. This has been a really interesting case study. On behalf of the audience, we really wish you well with your journey and with Foolproof, and hope you will come back, in a couple of years and share progress. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.